Hello, good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us. I appreciate you being here. My name is Dylan Stafford and welcome. And we're just really glad that you're here. The way we're going to do this, Haley and I'm going to interview Haley and you guys can, enjoy. You don't have to be on camera. If you have any questions as we go through, drop those in the chat and, about 12:40 or so, we will address any questions that have come up. And also if you want to ask them live, we can do that. But yeah, any questions before we get started? Patrick, thanks for being here. Any questions at all?
Nope, none for me. Thanks, Dylan. Thanks for organizing this.
Oh, my pleasure.
Nothing for me either.
Thanks for being here. And Haley's got one of those, like, you can get the results fast kind of MBA journey. So I'm really happy to get to share her story. All right, so I'm going to go into game mode. Oh. And I'm going to put this bear. This is how I tell the editors, okay, start after the bear. Okay.
Oh, that's funny.
All right. Welcome to the UCLA Anderson Drive Time podcast. My name is Dylan Stafford. I am your host today. I am joined, as you can see, by Haley Ehrlich, who is a member of the class of 23, halfway through her program. Haley, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thank you.
You are logging in from where?
I live in Chicago, Illinois.
Chicago, Illinois, and I work at the University of California, Los Angeles. Gee, that'll be interesting to hear how that all works.
Yes.
I'm really happy to have you here, Haley. Haley and I had a chance to kind of prepare a week or so back, and I'm always listening for cool stories, and Haley's career outcome trajectory is one of those really cool stories that, as an admissions dean, you're always listening for, because this is an opportunity. A place like UCLA, you're going to become smarter, you're going to think fearlessly, you're going to make an incredible network, you're going to share success, and you're going to get an X factor of confidence, and we call that drive change. And we're going to talk a little today about what it was like for Haley before she was admitted, when she was kind of considering what some of her other schools were. Maybe, that introspection, like, am I ready for an MBA? Is this the right time? Is this the right school? Is this the right fit? And how that's kind of really opened up for her. But the thing that really caught my ear was she's already executed her post-NBA career move, which was she had the goal of changing industries. She was in high tech. She wanted to get into sports and sports management, and she's done that. She's already not even halfway through the program, and she's now with the National Basketball Association, the NBA, as a growth marketing manager. So originally from Illinois, she started with a BS in business and finance, and then came to San Francisco, where she was working when she applied. And now she's back to Chicago. So she's done half of her MBA in Southern California remotely from San Francisco and Chicago. So with no further ado, Haley, it's really great to get to have this conversation today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to share more.
Thank you for being willing to just jump in, and glad we got the time zones all figured out. So
yeah, no, I'm sorry.
No, it's all
I live and work and school in 3 different time zones, so it's sometimes complicated.
Yeah, a little bit. We'll tell people a little bit. Let's kind of catch people up to speed. Let's kind of do the, when you were pre-MBA, when you were looking, where were you, what were you doing, and how were you going through your due diligence of looking for your graduate school?
Yeah, so I guess I'll start with my little elevator pitch on life. So I essentially, in undergrad, decided very quickly when I started at University of Illinois that I wanted to go into sports. It jumpstarted from me having a part-time job at school, where I worked at the athletic department. And once I was doing that, I thought that was the end goal. That was where I needed to end up. But as I came into senior year of undergrad, I realized that the sports stream was very hard to obtain the way that I wanted. I wanted to go directly into marketing. I didn't want to take the original path of going into sports from a ticket sales job or an event job. So I wanted to go directly into the business side, which was very difficult to do as an undergrad. And so I ended up taking a job in tech. As you said, I did come from tech. So although I had all my internships in sports, I actually took a role post-college in San Francisco doing recruiting for YouTube. And so moved all the way out to San Francisco 1 week after graduation. that I'd
Wow.
never been to before in my life. And I decided that I was just going to go full change in jobs. I thought it might be the right role. I thought, YouTube's a big enough name that I'll figure it out. So I was in recruiting, which was nowhere on my path that I wanted to do. I thought marketing, I thought sports, I never thought recruiting, but took the opportunity, moved out across the country, thought it would get me closer to that goal. And then 6 months into recruiting, I hated it. And so that kind of led me on this journey of how do I get back to where I thought I wanted? Where was that end goal of sports and sports marketing and working on the business side of sports? And so I needed to find those pivotal moments where I could go back from recruiting and tech, two different changes, all the way back to the other side of sports marketing, and in a higher up role. And so try to find those pivotal moments. And so first I switched to a startup owned by Google called Wing, where we worked on direct to consumer drone delivery. So Uber Eats for drones. And we worked on building out all of the marketing for that for 2 years within the incubator. And then kind of figured out once I was 2 years in. So this is, about 3 years after school ended. And I was like, I really still feel that my dream goal is to go sports marketing. How do I get sports entertainment? How do I get to that point? And so I did a lot of coffee chats and interviews with people that like had those dream roles, and decided that I thought the best pivotal moment would be to go back to school and get my MBA, get the network, get the foundation of marketing more. Like you said, I was an undergrad, I did finance as well. And so I didn't feel like I had the full skill set that I needed to go and do this role properly. And so I thought an MBA could do many of those things, obviously network and obviously get more footing under my belt about the education piece. And so decided to go and apply. Looked at, again, I was in San Francisco at the time. This was 2020 though. This was January 2020. So right before everything happened, I had made the executive decision I was going back to school. And so looked at all these programs, knew that I wanted to still continue my current career path and not give up that. So I decided to go part-time. So I narrowed down the schools. And then it became what school can best serve me for sports or entertainment marketing. And so that narrowed it down even further to obviously UCLA has a whole memes program, entertainment focus. There are sports classes as well. And I thought that the network was what I wanted in terms of California. And I just thought the UCLA alumni reach would reach all of the places I needed to go. And I started looking and going on LinkedIn and seeing all of that. And so it narrowed it down to a few schools. And I would say the only reason that I was gung-ho about UCLA when I applied to all the schools. But I wanted to, of course, see out all my options. And I still felt like at the end of the day, I wanted a supportive network because I had heard bad things about, MBA programs being super competitive at some schools and people stepping on each other to get to where they needed to. And I was like, I've always been the person that wants to bring other people with me and have that team collaboration. And every time I talked to UCLA admissions, it was, we're team focused. All of your classes will have these study groups. Everything's group work. Like you'll never have to feel like you're competing for that grade, or, you're always trying to help everyone else in the class as well to come along with you. So that also sold me. Obviously, outside of the main reasons of the network and the school, it was just also that collaborative culture, which I've obviously gotten this far. And then, I guess we can get to how I ended up at the NBA, but that was the background story.
Well, awesome. Well, we'll go memento. Let's tell things out of business. So we'll circle back to the YMBA stuff, but let's talk about the highlight, because I think this is really, really great. So you're the fall of 2020, the magical bizarro. Let's just do this with never ever being in the same room.
Yes.
So you're going through the virtual first year.
Mm-hmm.
You're in tech. You're working for this is kind of cool. I mean, a Google incubator, the drones of Uber, like that's all neat, but it's not your calling.
Mm-hmm.
You've got these 3 years in front of you. None of us exactly know how it's going to go in fall of 20. That was like high variance moment, but you're like a person who's already moved to California with no network a week after graduation. You've already made a pivot from YouTube to Google. You're a bold person. We'll go back to your MBA choice group, but tell me what happened. Cause I love this. This is the part I was like, I got to get this part recorded, because there's an element of proactivity here that I think is kind of the key to unlock the door of UCLA.
Yeah.
That, I always think our strength is that we have 100 amazing faculty going in 100 totally different directions.
Yeah.
And that's exciting and entrepreneurial, and it's exciting and entrepreneurial. And that's our strength. But I think it's also the back of the coin is there is no recipe here.
Yeah.
There are many recipes, but we're not we all go to marketing.
Right.
We are a California school. We're a Southern California school. we're like LA.
Yeah.
Whatever you want, it's happening here.
Yeah.
Across the rainbow, it's happening here. So I just, in advance, it's the proactivity that I love. Plus being on the court, being in the right place at the right time. So walk us through how this pivotal moment happened for you with your career transition.
Yeah. So I did decide obviously to start in 2020. I had applied in January, but gotten in June, which everything was still even more of a mess because even when I was going through the interviews in April of 2020, there was still like a question mark of it could just go away in the next few months. No one knew. So still decided to go forth with it part-time. I still had my job, but my job had actually been furloughed because we were heavily influenced by the government and the government was shut down. And so we had gone into this furlough period where I was working 20 hours a week. And I thought, even with this happening in my life, I might as well go to school part-time. I thought maybe it would transition to full-time, but thought I just need to go and still find my path. I know that the world is chaotic. Obviously, even more so in sports. No one could play sports live at the time in 2020. So although I had started in the fall, and you're right, the program is so diverse and I loved that about it. It wasn't like everyone was going into marketing like some of the other schools or everyone's going into tech. I just felt like everyone was doing their own thing. And I came in and I was like, how do I get involved, right? How in 2020, everything's remote. I'm furloughed. I have so much time on my hands, everything being remote. Where can I really put forth my effort and meet people and start to shape my journey at UCLA? And so I actually joined, I think, 5 clubs and then FEMBA Council, which is our student council. And I joined all of them because I was like, how do I meet people on Zoom? I need to find these communities and try to be a part of them. And so I ended up joining many clubs and going to so many Zoom events, and all these coffee chats with anyone I met that remotely had anything interesting. I was like, I just want to set up more time because I had so much time on my hands and I just wanted to start to kind of craft what I wanted. And although that meant sports marketing, I still didn't see the path directly, like you were saying, how to get there. There's no line by line program. There's no journey that you have to do to get this internship or this job. And so I was like, I need to figure out how to do that for myself. And so I joined all these clubs. And the one that really stuck out to me was EMA, which is our Entertainment Management Association, and then SBA, which is our Sports Business Association. And so those two I felt like crafted together was what I wanted to do. And in my essay to UCLA, I wrote, I want to be at this pivotal moment. I would never forget my essay, this pivotal moment of live sports on a streaming service. It's the best combination of where the sports industry is going. This is pre-2020. And so I just thought that was like where the industry was going even before the shutdown. And so that was what excited me. And of course, I was really excited by joining both these clubs where obviously at the time that was where sports had to go because it was 2020 and it was COVID and everyone else was on the same path of, I want to join streaming with live sports. And I was like, okay, so there's all these people that are trying to do it. How do we get there? And so in the fall, we do these things called DOJs, which is Day on the Job, which each club kind of puts on their own week of it to try to find the alumni and the companies that are hiring from UCLA for internships and full-time for those roles. And so that gave me the perfect opportunity to kind of network outside of just these clubs where I found other people trying to do it. And we're all trying to figure out what that path is, especially at a time where everything was uncertain. And so I went to these DOJ events for both entertainment and sports, and thankfully went to this one presentation from the NBA who I believe the guy I met with, who's no longer at the NBA, was an undergraduate alumni, not technically an Anderson alumni, but he still loved the Bruins and he wanted to present. And so he did the DOJ for the NBA for the Sports Association. And so I went to that and he was talking all about how the NBA was shut down at the time, but they were putting so much money and resources behind streaming and that the NBA really wanted to grow their business in streaming, knowing that they were going to have this bubble that they were currently crafting to have the NBA bubble come in December, and they wanted to be able to stream it all. And they were on the path to do that. And they were hiring like crazy. And so I was sitting there like, how does anyone get a job in sports when sports isn't a thing right now? And he kind of made that click in my head. And I went online that night and applied on LinkedIn of all places, not even through him, but applied on LinkedIn and got a call at 7 a.m. the next morning that woke me up. That was the recruiter for the job that said, hey, we got your resume last night. We're actually in the final round interviews for this role, but we think that you might be the right fit. So we're going to speed you up. We're going to have your initial interview right now. And then we're going to do a full day final round interview tomorrow. And I was like, okay. And so I kind of just got up and out of bed and was like, okay, we're going to have an initial round interview in 30 minutes with the hiring manager. And so that was kind of what sped it up. And then I reached out to the alumni. It was too fast for me to even reach out to him, but I reached out to him after my initial round interview and was like, hey, I'm already apparently in this final round bucket. I know nothing really about what's going on. I just was thrown into it. I need to learn more. So I connected with him. And then I ended up having the final round interview. And then I connected with 2 other people that he introduced me to that would end up being on my team outside of the interview process. So I had like coffee chats with them. And then, and then Thanksgiving. So that was end of October. And then Thanksgiving Day, it took them a little bit to put the offer together, but Thanksgiving Day, I got a call and they were like, we want you to start today on Thanksgiving because we have the bubble and we need to start streaming now. So we're going to hire you. And it took me I had to help with my startup who had restarted at the time. And I needed to fill my position because they were so small. And so I ended up having to take 2-month hiatus between the role to like fill my spot. But then I started in January and have been there since and have been promoted since, and everything's been great. And I couldn't even believe that after the fact, I could tell people, 4 months in to being in the UCLA program that is 3 years long, I had a new role in the exact industry and in the exact role that I wrote about in my essay, which was all, my return on investment was already clicking for me, that I had networked. And I still think it's worth continuing with the program because I was like, well, I still don't feel like I have everything I need, right? I still wanted more of a network. I still wanted to learn more. And I felt like UCLA still had this community that I wanted to be a part of. And so I think everything is just fallen into place in a very unexpected way for COVID world. So everything's been great though.
Well, I'm glad I'm glad you're going to go ahead and, do the rest of the program.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, because that can happen too. There are people who, they start a startup or they get a dream job and they choose not to finish the program, which is sort of, that's the first prize, but, we want to give you a lifetime of surprises, right? And, that's the point of a graduate degree is all of that together, the education, the experience, the network, and the confidence to just weave that through. I just love it. From hearing it online one night to applying the next morning and getting, you didn't even have time to send your thank you. I really enjoyed hearing you last night. You didn't.
It was a wild, that was a wild. I couldn't even believe the phone call. I mean, I saw it was a New York area code and I didn't even think anything of it because what recruiter have you ever had call you the night after you apply on a random, LinkedIn post that they're sorting through everyone? I still don't understand how it happened even today, even though obviously I know my team and the recruiter now, and I just still don't understand how that happened, but obviously very thankful that is what happened. And obviously sports is still going through changes even, 2 years later. So yeah, everything's been super positive.
Well, I'm going to say they saw your incredible LinkedIn profile and it was 99% that and 1% your Anderson MBA. And, who knows, right? That's the beauty of networking. I love networking because it's such a non-linear part of living.
Right.
And, when do executives become executives, right? When do you actually start to own like, oh my God, I am CEO of my own career.
Yeah.
Right. And it's a chicken and egg thing, right? Because when we're starting out, you're off to San Francisco and, everything, this is not Illinois and, right. Just all of that. And you're looking for your lane and you're trying out different things. And a lot of it is not it. And but you were hearing, you kind of returned to what had been that experience your senior year in senior year in college, right? That had been like, I think this is the deal. Yeah. And then, you went and did something else because that's the way life is. And now you're back and then you're okay. So great. Well, let's go back a little bit because I think since it all was really pretty compressed in your timeline. So let's go back to okay. So I'm in San Francisco, I'm getting some traction. And so how did it sound in Haley's internal calculator? Maybe I need another degree. Maybe I need, what was the cascade of thinking? Was it any graduate degree? Was it a sports management degree? Was it how did you go through that? What were the schools? What were the choices? How did you narrow it down?
That was a hard process. I mean, I will say in undergrad or even in high school, I was this crazy student that in 6th grade decided that I wanted to do something in advertising and marketing. And obviously my path has changed a lot since then in terms of the details, but I will always remember telling my mom in 6th grade that I wanted to work at Leo Burnett and be an advertising executive. And so what 6th grader comes up with that, I don't know, but
Where did you, how did you even know who Leo Burnett was? Your
I had
parents?
older cousins that worked at Leo Burnett in New York. And so it
Wow.
was just, what was in front of me. And I just thought that that's what I wanted to do. And thankfully it is something that I like and I'm good at, but it could have changed a lot since then, but it hasn't. I mean, it has in terms of the actual role focus, but yeah. So I knew at a really young age, which is bizarre, that I wanted to do business. I kind of ended up wrapping it into business and not necessarily marketing for a while, but in undergrad, that meant I was applying to business undergrad schools. And I had looked at UCLA and they don't have an undergraduate program for Anderson. So I went to UCLA and I was like, I think LA is a place I could live forever, being from Chicago. And I was like, warm weather, it's great. I have family in LA. And I was like, Anderson is for grad school students. So even at a young age, when I went for my admission visit in high school, they had even said to me, we don't have an undergraduate program, but Anderson's a great school, maybe circle back on that, when you get to that point. And so that was always in the back of my head, which is crazy that planted the seed. I mean, junior year of high school, all the way till now. But that was a seed that was planted really young, that they had a graduate program that apparently was great. And so I could look at that later. Obviously at the time, I didn't know what that would mean, but it was something that I thought about. And then obviously being from Chicago, it's been thinking about where, my family's gone, which is like Northwestern and University of Chicago. I obviously have great programs. I looked at NYU a bit just because big city and Berkeley being from San Francisco, but I obviously had the seed planted of Anderson at a young age. And so through that process though, of like getting to the point where I knew I wanted to go. And I think after I finished undergrad and I was still unsure of my path, especially starting in recruiting, I was like, I'm doing something that I didn't really expect, but I feel like I kind of know where it's going to end up. And so even my first job out of college, I was like, I think I'm going to go back to grad school at some point. It just sounds like the right thing to do. Even though being in tech, they were like, tech doesn't necessarily need it all the time. If you stay in your linear path in tech, it doesn't necessarily, in some industries, it gets you that next job. It gets you that management role, it gets you the senior management role all the way to CMO. But in tech, they don't really guarantee you anything by getting a graduate degree. In some roles, yes. In most roles, they're like, it's just for you more than us. And so I thought about it though, when I started Google, and I was like, I really think that I want to do it for myself anyway. And so even my first month out of undergrad, I was like, I want to do grad school. Where's my 5-year plan? I started doing all this crazy stuff about how do I get back? And so that was always part of the plan. And so when I finally started getting to that point though, where I knew I wanted to apply, was when I was at Wing at the drone delivery company. And like you said, I was really good at the role. I liked marketing. I was like, I really still think this is the right path for me, but it was about the company. And I was like, I don't think I'm passionate about drones. And I started to like really dive deep in that by myself and with my mentors and what I didn't like about it and what I did like. And I wanted to be sure of why I was making that switch. And if sports really still made sense 3 years later, I wasn't exactly sure. And so I started doing all this deep diving, networking, talking to mentors, had my mentors set me up with people. And I finally, at the end of the day, thought, I think tech isn't wrong. I just think this government drone business is not something I have a passion for. And I'm losing momentum 2 years in that some of the things we were dealing with, I was like, I don't want to keep growing in this role. I don't see it as being something I'm passionate about. And so my manager was super helpful. She actually went to Northwestern for her MBA. And she was like talking me through what that looked like. She went in 2008, which funny enough, like ended up being a similar situation. And so she had said to me, and this is again, pre-COVID, which I think is insane, but she had said to me, it's better to preemptively do it before, a world disaster happens, and have that footing to get that next role. And I think, and I was explaining to her why UCLA with the network and sports, and she was all for it. And she was super supportive. And she said, I think that might be the right program for you. And I think started now, well, we have a team, especially in the FEMBA program, where you have a manager that's supportive of it, a company that's supportive of you going and doing it. We're all here to help you manage that the difference. Obviously, this was pre-COVID. So going to the office in San Francisco and having to commute down to LA. And we were talking through all that and all the changes that would have to happen to make it happen, but they were super supportive. And I said, what's a better time to start than having a manager that's 100% behind me, having a company that's behind me, also realizing more of my vision of it has to be sports and it has to somehow involve sports. And so she was honestly that turnkey, and obviously wrote my recommendation letter that was, this is what I want to do, super supportive, and applied obviously January of 2020. So obviously it ended up being great. I mean, she had this whole mindset that 2020, regardless of COVID, she had this mindset that there was going to be another economic crash, which I think a lot of people did at the time. And so she was like, 2020 might be the next great recession, like, oh, wait. And like, you should start school during that because everyone else is going to be looking for those same roles after it's all over. And so I was like, okay, she's right. And then obviously COVID happened, and it very similarly, like I know a lot of people decided to go to grad school during COVID because of the same things. You want job security, you want to be able to get that role that you want. So I think all of it worked out for a reason. But to your point, I mean, it was definitely like her help and me thinking through my 5-year plan, and that fit in. And looking at all those other schools, obviously I had to go through those processes of, I applied to all those schools that I mentioned, and it was just trying to find that right balance of not as competitive, which I found. I was also really young. This was 3 years out of undergrad, which I know a lot of programs looked at me and said, it has to be 5 years. Like there's this 5-year minimum and you have to do the 5 years. And I just felt like, well, why can't I have my own reasons? I had, obviously, like you're hearing, I had all these reasons in my head of why I needed to be then. And I felt like if I wrote that in my essay and I had my interview and I talked about them, someone should understand. But I know, as I told you in our pre-recordings, that I had all these different interactions with alumni from other schools where they had told me I was too young. They didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what I was doing with my life. And although I'm communicating that, I still have the same vision for my life and the same goals. And I thought the MBA program fit perfectly into that for me. A lot of these people were listening to me and saying, well, that's not how my thought process works. So no, that doesn't make any sense. Or, you're going to not fit into the competition. You're not going to be able to compete with people. And that kind of was the red flags in my head, of even more so when going through the process of applying, why UCLA? Because when I went to my interview and my admission stuff for UCLA, it was like, we support that. You've pivoted so many times. It sounds like you're on the right path. And some of these other schools were like, no, like we have no interest in talking to you because you haven't been a manager yet. You haven't been, you haven't done all these things that we find as a checklist to be able to get an MBA. And I think having our MBA program be so diverse, which I love about it, is just the best part of the program. Having all these students that, in my study group, one student was a nurse that was on maternity leave and decided she wanted to switch careers. But like, if we all were so ingrained in this specific applicant, we wouldn't have people like that in the program. So I think everything in terms of like our student body is because of that.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Now this is like two sides I don't even know how to ask this, because what I love about how you present is like, you're like this ball of energy and confidence and go-getterness. And then what you told me when we were talking in our pre-meeting, was that, you had your own kind of imposter syndrome, and everybody does. Every time we take a stair step up, high school to college to the first job, living in Illinois to living in San Francisco, every time we take a step in life, we feel imposter syndrome. Because we are, right? We've never done it before. We're the new person on the block. So I just love how you can tell me about your internal state, and I want to ask about that in 1 second. So that's the question that's coming, but you would never know it from the outside, because life responds to action. If you want results in life, you have to take action, and you are a human being who takes a lot of action, and you have results commensurate with that. But what no one ever knows is what we're dealing with in our own internal monologue type thing. So walk us through a little bit about, because it was also a little bit about, you've alluded to it. Am I ready for grad school, or am I ready yet? And you actually had people tell you, no, you're not.
Yeah.
And, but it's like, well, what's so big about 5 years? Like, what about the person who grew up in Long Beach and, got a technical degree and now works for Boeing, and they have 7 years? I mean, no, I don't pick on Boeing. That's our number one employer of all time. But like, it is this kind of quality, quantity conversation that we even have as admissions officers.
Right.
Because what we want is what you're experiencing, that, wow, my study group is so diverse.
Right.
I want people who've got 15 years of experience meeting somebody with 3 amazing years of experience, right? And everybody's learning from everyone if we do our job right. So talk to me about how'd you keep your head in the game, and what have you learned about yourself so far?
I think even like you're saying, every change in your life, you feel imposter syndrome. And I think you picked on it correctly. I think moving across the country to San Francisco, where I didn't know anyone, I'd never been there before, and I started in a role that I'd never done before. Recruiting was something I never even thought about. And I thought that I had these skills from undergrad, obviously in sports marketing and marketing in general and finance, but I was joining a role that was outside my preview, and I didn't know the area. And I think I just had to start from nothing again. And so of course it's scary to anyone. And I think that, sparked the imposter syndrome that just kept unraveling as the years went on of, I'm in recruiting. And then I found out I didn't really like the role. So then I was like, well, how am I supposed to figure out how to get to that next role? And when I talked to people, a lot of the stories were the same in certain roles. Like you need to start, you need to be on this exact linear path. Like a lot of people would be like, you need to get into a rotational program in marketing to get this title, or you need to go back. And someone told me once to get into sports that I needed to quit my job and go get coffee for an executive in sports to be able to get their job. And I just kept sitting in there hearing all these things of like linear, but like you're saying, it did give me imposter syndrome because I'm like, I don't necessarily want to quit my job in recruiting to go get coffee for someone. I felt like I was already doing a good job. It wasn't the job I wanted, but I was like, I feel like I have the skills to do something more than get coffee. And I was kind of at this point where I was like, I'm already feeling imposter syndrome. And then, like you said, though, I did take action, obviously, to get to the startup. That was not an easy task. I had to do a lot of applications, and there's this program that Google helps send people. But I got really lucky with where I was sent because some roles they end up giving you don't like, and you end up not taking it on full time. I obviously ended up taking mine on full time and loving my manager and the team and the role, but that doesn't always happen to everyone. So I definitely got lucky. But I still, even in that role, I joined a team where I was by far, this was a 70-person incubator company, and I was by far the youngest employee by probably 10 years. Wow. And so, so I was the only like new grad, as they call it. I was 2 years out of school, not even, I was a year and a half out of school. And I was by far the youngest because the incubator, as any startup, hires, a lot of people with experience, and they hire from the top down, right? They're hiring the CEO, the director of operations. They're not hiring the coordinators and the entry level roles to like help build the foundation because they needed to start from the top and they needed all these people in place to do that. And so the 70 employees, most came from these crazy roles where they were, the CMO of their old company, and they were brought in by Google to help start this new technology, which is not an easy task. And so I was really young. And so that gave me even more imposter syndrome because my role was to start all the marketing, start the whole brand, start the website, start every marketing channel as like the youngest person and as someone that is good at executing, but they wanted me to just do it. And they would send me, my manager thankfully trusted me a lot and would send me into these meetings with the CEO and be like, get his opinion on what color he wants the brand to be. And I'd be like, I don't even know how to do that. I don't know how to communicate with someone with this level. I don't know how to even communicate these questions that you need answered. And so that built the imposter syndrome, but also my manager was super supportive in helping me overcome that. But I think I was in the midst of that and obviously figuring out my career path when I wanted to go back to school. And I think going, like you said, going through those interviews and hearing that I needed 5 years, and I was already feeling this imposter syndrome from work, but I thought the right path to get back to feeling confident was to go back to school, get really good at marketing and really hone in on what I want in my career and like really feel confident in that. But as I'm trying to do that and trying to get on that path, I'm hearing from my alumni interviews and a lot of admissions people, not at UCLA, from these other programs, like, you don't have 5 years. Like I said before, I was never a manager. I wasn't even in marketing for that long. I mean, I'd done my internships in undergrad in marketing, but after school, I had been in recruiting and in this random tech role where, of course, I was doing marketing, but they were like, oh, okay, so like, what do you have to give? And I was like, well, I did some impossible tasks. Like I started all these marketing channels. I worked with the CEO. But technically my title, was a coordinator level. I was a marketing specialist was how I started, which is basically a marketing coordinator. I was the lowest of levels. And so I would come into these interviews and people would be like, I don't think you have a place here. I don't think that you have enough experience to bring to the table to help other people learn. And you won't be a good fit in like your program and you won't be able to provide in class. Like I kept hearing these things that I thought that I could bring it, right? That's why I went through the process. And so as I'm going through these interviews, I was like, maybe I'm not ready. Maybe they're right. Maybe because I didn't manage someone, I'm not going to be able to come into these conversations and provide any insight or be able to give back to the community at my MBA program. Like I'll still learn, but maybe I'm not the right person to be in a group with. And so I started to really question myself. And so when I started UCLA, which I never had any of those questions or problems from UCLA, but it's funny because when I went to my interview, it was the last of my MBA program interviews. And I started with that, which like, obviously I didn't need to, but in my interview, it was like, hey, just so you know, I just want to point it out just in case it's a problem. I only have 3 years of experience. A lot of it was not in, what I want to do with my life, but this is why I think I'm deserving of it. And, this alumni was like, oh no, like, I think you have an amazing resume. I wouldn't have asked you about that. And so that obviously was already a green flag. But when I started at UCLA, I still had all these terrifying thoughts of, even though everyone's been accepting in the process, I was like, when I started UCLA, am I going to get in the study group, like in all of our group projects, and be like, wow, this girl's so young. She doesn't know what she's doing. We can't trust her. Especially when I was joining a group, and my group in particular, like, was definitely more experienced. They all had families and kids. I'm obviously young and single. And I was like, I'm joining all these people that have a ton of experience. And so I sat there and really questioned it, and would introduce myself in every coffee chat, in every group meeting, in every club event. And I'd be like, I don't know what to do because I'm young, and I want to preface this in case you all were wondering. And so I would start every conversation like that at UCLA, which then one day I met with a student who has since graduated, and we had a coffee chat in the fall of 2020. And I came in and did this. He literally, the first question was, wow, did you come to your MBA program after 3 years? And of course I took that as a bad thing. So I started rambling about how I have all this experience and I have all these reasons to be here. Oh, I went crazy on it. I was like, I don't belong here. You're right. You found me. And then he comes back and he was like, hold on. We don't need you to like give your reasons why. I came here after 1 year of undergrad. And I was like, oh, and I'm finding this only other person I had met in the program that was around the same age as me. And he was like, it's funny that you did all that, because my first year I did all of that too, but he was in his third year. And he was like, I am telling you now, you will be at school here and you will never have to feel that way. And you will never be asked about your age. You will never feel young. You will never feel like you're incompetent. So he really helped me though. I think that was the turning point, where obviously all these other things that were happening, I was going to these DOJs, no one was asking me. Like, I had all these other experiences where I wasn't actually being told that I was young, but I think that was the turning point where I met someone else that had felt the same way as me. And he was like, you don't have to worry anymore. Like, just take it in strides, and you're here for a reason. And, admissions picked you to be here, and you're obviously providing things for the school. And so you might as well just, stop thinking about that as much. And so that was the turning point where I slowly started to get rid of it. And I think UCLA also, though, gave me the confidence in my role. Like, I showed up as my role as chief of staff, which was reporting to a bunch of executives at the NBA when I started. And so I was doing all these large scale projects of how do we bring streaming during 2020 and during the bubble. And so I was having to report and write emails to all these executives, which I had done in my startup, but I was like, this is the NBA. This is a life-changing organization that I work for. This is something that is so important. If I get wrong, that like it's going to affect a million people, millions of people around the world. So other than my startup, who only affected 300 people in the world. So I had imposter syndrome, but I felt like my program, and even just talking to that student, I think changed my perspective of, they gave me the job for a reason now, right? Like, same thing with the MBA program. I'm in the MBA program for a reason. I should show up and act like I have a reason to be here. And so thankfully, I don't think that without this program, don't think I would have gotten the job, but two, would have been able to show up on my first day in January and been like, I'm here for a reason. I can do this job. I'm going to figure it out. And obviously it has worked well. And so I've been promoted since. I've changed roles 3 times since. And so I just feel, feel like I'm doing well at my job because though I gained that confidence and no longer think about imposter syndrome. So no, today I don't really feel that anymore.
Well, that'll be the soundbite that marketing will love, where you just, totally put the halo on UCLA, and that's awesome. And I mean, what I hear, yes. And, it's like, I think sometimes like the MBA opens the door, but you're the human being who walks through the door. And, that like the second the door closes behind you, day one, first new experience, nobody cares if you have an MBA, just like your experience. Nobody cares how old I am. Right. It's like, so thank you for the acknowledgement of UCLA, but it's also, Haley, it's your character. It's your character. And if you want to have a little grit, go give yourself some challenges. And you've just done that and done that and done that and done that and done that. And now you're a chief of staff to the NBA with millions of people's entertainment at the other end of your actions. and you're walking in the door from day one, like, I'm here, I'm ready to go. So, it's both. And that to me is the beauty of FEMBA. Like, I was a full-time student at Chicago. I was the second youngest person out of 550. I only met one guy younger than me, Brad Shamonic. But I felt like everybody's little brother for those 21 months. So what? At some point, I had to let go of it. Yeah. Right. And so it is like, obviously we want to have inclusive and diverse, and we want to have incredible atmosphere, but it's a big, challenging world out there, and we're getting you ready for the real world, not like utopia. So it's like these challenges, they do accrue. You apply to business schools, you get admitted to business schools, then you accept, then you go to orientation, then you do the first quarter, then you do the second quarter, you have your first study group, you have your second study group, but it's, and then you layered on the industry shift of your dreams in the middle of all that. So, all right, we got our first question here. You may have mentioned this earlier, but how did you ultimately decide you wanted to pursue FEMBA versus full-time? Excellent. And what are some of the biggest challenges you faced? Oh, yes, here. Balancing work and all your involvement with your MBA while you moved from San Francisco, Chicago.
That's a great question. I get asked that every day of my life by my family. So, I would say, so first question, FEMBA versus full-time. I knew, and this is a me thing, but I do think that it's important to think about for everyone. I knew that I was already on some sort of path that I wanted to continue. I do think it's fair that a lot of students want to switch completely role industry. They have no experience. Like, for example, I'm surprised that my classmate that was a nurse wanted to do FEMBA, because I feel like there were very different paths to go to from being a nurse in a hospital to being in the business world. Like, hats off to her for doing it. But
was that Alex? Was that Alex by chance?
Yeah, Alex. Yeah, she's
amazing.
She's incredible student. But I was surprised because I felt like full-time did that better. I was like, okay, you can commit all of your time to doing switching careers. And I think the main factor, at least in my head, to doing a full-time was getting that internship experience between your 2 years. I was like, if you really want to switch everything, I felt like getting that internship showcase, that you didn't have this experience on your resume before, you could prove that you could do it. And you're learning skills you never learned before. But I felt like I had already had an undergraduate. I ended up getting an undergraduate business degree, obviously, from the University of Illinois. And so I felt like I had the foundation and I didn't necessarily need to restart it. And obviously we still do those classes in FEMBA. I'm not saying we don't, but I just felt like I was already doing a job that could, one, still help me build in my career. I was still doing a marketing role. I was still gaining momentum to become a manager. And I just felt like to drop all of that to like start over as an intern didn't really make sense for me. And also I didn't think so from a financial perspective. I think the programs end up being about the same at the end of the day, but I was like, if I'm making money during it, I didn't feel as insecure, I guess, in my financials. And so I was like, I just think that it made the most sense to do part-time. Obviously, though, that takes on a lot of taking out away from your personal time. So going into the second question, how do you balance? I mean, that at the end of the day is the question. Like, do you want to take the effort to balance it? You can't just decide it. You have to put in the effort to do it. I think full-time is much easier to manage. I mean, they take, a few classes, you have so much free time. You obviously do your internships and you do side projects and clubs, but I just felt like I'm a busybody. And I was like, what am I going to do with all that free time that I can't be doing now with work? And that thought did come into, maybe I do a part-time job, maybe I go contract role, but I just felt like I needed to be doing something. And that something meant that I was going to be a FEMBA. And so that's how I chose that. And then balancing, yes, you make that acknowledgement when you apply that you're going to have to balance, you're going to have to give up free time. I do think, honestly, that doing it in COVID has made it much easier. Obviously, I didn't live anywhere close to campus. So that was already a fear and definitely an anxiety, like applying of how am I going to manage commuting to work, which was actually a 3-hour commute a day because I lived in San Francisco and went to Palo Alto. So I was already commuting a ton on the highway every day. And so I was like, how am I supposed to do that and fly back and forth to LA and get my homework done and have a personal life? And so I was already struggling with that when I applied, but I was like, I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to do it. But obviously, since COVID, things have been obviously more flexible in terms of doing remote class, obviously not having to travel as much. And I just think it was easier then to find the balance of doing homework while we were transitioning in the world to being more remote. And so I do think I got lucky by that. but I do think that it's manageable. I think that first quarter is rough. I think you have to let your body and your mind and your life and your time, you have to kind of just let it all adjust. You can go in with expectations, but it's going to be different than that. And so you just have to let your body and your whole personality adjust to it. But I do think it's manageable. I mean, I think that this program is very flexible. I mean, we talked a lot, especially in FEMBA Council and our student council, about what other programs we're doing during COVID. I don't think anyone was as flexible and as heartwarming as UCLA's been. Plug to UCLA, but also it's just how I felt. Like I felt very confident in telling people, like, I go to school in LA. I have to move to New York now for this role, which obviously I never did, but I'm moving across the country during COVID from San Francisco to New York. And I still have to go to class in LA. And of course, that thought came of maybe I transfer, maybe I go to a New York school because that's where I'm going. Maybe I try to go to NYU, but I valued UCLA so much that I wanted to find a way to make it work. And so I think this program has been super flexible in the best way. Of course, we all have our qualms with it, but I think in general, like having these FEMBA courses where you can travel back and forth once a month, or having these new remote classes, which is apparently now going to become a thing of having these options on weeknights, where I'm in New York hours all day. And then I have a class at 7 p.m. Pacific time, but I'm like, it's fine. I would rather do that than transfer schools and have to figure that out. And I think in terms of balancing, making your life a calendar, your personal life a calendar, is the best thing you can ever do. And we talk a lot about that in one of my courses, actually, this quarter, was how do you balance your life, and like trying to find out what the best balance is for you and your happiness and your life. So we talked about scheduling. Like I have a Google calendar for my personal life that doesn't touch my work calendar, doesn't really touch my school calendar. It is separate. And I put everything in there. Like I'm going to go on this coffee chat, or I'm going to go get dinner with friends, or I'm going to just have a night by myself and not touch school. But I have to like balance that. But I think I will say my boyfriend tells me all the time that I'm the best time manager he's ever met, because I, to a T, will say, okay, at 2 p.m. I'm writing my paper, and I sit down and do it. And I think it makes me more productive too at work. Like I'm like, okay, at 5 p.m. I have to shut my computer and I have to go work out, because that's the time it fits into my day. And if I don't go do it, then oh well, but it makes everything more productive. I don't feel like I can just sit and procrastinate anymore, which I think is honestly a good thing. But I don't know what I'm going to do after I graduate, because now I'm freaked out that I'm going to have so much time. So I think it's a good thing. I think, and everyone adjusts to it. Like I would not say anyone in my program 2 years in now is like, I can't do it. Like I think you just adjust and you just get used to it, and everyone's there to help you and support you. So it's all been good.
You do become a time management ninja. You know, I've done hundreds of these interviews for 2 decades, and again and again and again. And no, thank you, Patrick, for the question. We appreciate, or the series of questions. We're starting to come to the end. My little friend is here. Hey, yo, everybody. It's the Bruin Bear. So you get 3 Bruin Bear hugs, Haley. So, you know, we like to say it takes a village to get through FEMBA, right? It takes a village to raise a child is the African proverb. And our version of it is it takes a village to get through FEMBA. Nobody does this on their own. It takes a support network, and no one is an executive in life on their own, right? CEOs, C-suite people, they build alliances, they build support. So, you know, the 3 bear hugs that I want to give you an opportunity to share. 3 people who've been your support network: a friend, a family member, and I'd love to hear your favorite faculty member, even though you're only halfway through, so you're not even done yet. But if you could give some shout outs, friend, family, and a faculty, who would you like to acknowledge for getting you at least halfway through?
Okay. Friend. I mean, I think all of my friends, to be honest, have been super supportive in it. A lot of my friends have decided to go to grad school because of me. So that's been not an MBA program. Don't worry, not an MBA program, but a lot of them see that I'm going to school in LA and they're like, why can't I go do it? So a lot of them are in school now, different degrees, but that I think, I don't know if I can point to one friend. I would say school friend wise was Alex. Alex was in my study group, and she had her baby during orientation week. I don't know if you remember, and she was in my study group. And I was like, oh my goodness, my first experience in study groups is going to be this student that's not going to be there because she's going to have this newborn baby. And I respected it, but I was like, oh my goodness, I don't even have, like, she's just going to drop off the face of the earth. And she didn't, obviously,
Right.
and was full force, showed up 2 days later after the hospital and was like, don't worry, my husband's taking care of it. I'm here to do school. And she showed up to everything. She organized everything. And we're still really close friends to this day, like extremely close friends.
And
We
she
talk about
lives,
it all the
she
time.
lives not in
She also,
California
yes,
either.
which we also connected on. Yes, she lives in Denver. And so we talked about all the time, and she has 4 kids and obviously this newborn. I was like, how are you going to start commuting when things go back in person? And she was the nurse that switched to going into insurance. And I was like, how are you going to do all of this? And so she's been a huge inspiration and support. Like we support each other in all of these things. So that's that. And then family. So I will say my family member is actually someone that is deceased, but I think my grandma at the beginning, who was a professor at a grad school program, was always telling us that higher education meant so much more than just the money, the price tag on it, and that everyone should go to grad school. She believed that everyone could learn from higher education and people could pursue their dreams with higher education. And I never believed her for a while. And then my sister and I are both in grad school at the same time. So she got her wish. And so I think that she passed away even before I went to UCLA, which is sad. But I think that was also like, I still have this in my brain of her saying that to me. Like I couldn't drop out of the program when I got my dream job because I was like, this degree means something to me, but it also means something to my family. And so I would say, even though she's not here to support me day by day, I think about that a lot. And I think my whole family echoes her. And they're like, she would really love that you both are in grad school and getting these degrees. And so she's the family member. And then faculty, that's a good question. I think I respect all the faculty for dealing with 2020 and dealing with going from in-person to remote. And I would say a lot of the faculty have been here forever and don't want to change their ways. But I think they've been super great at it, honestly, for what we've been going through. I think that none of them have just been upright and not taught or, done away with things. And I think they're all open to listening to us and adjusting and their school teachings and doing these Zoom breakout rooms and all of these things. And so I don't know if I can point to one faculty. And like, thankfully, being on FEMBA Council, I talked to all my professors one-on-one the first year, especially. And I don't know if I can point to one. I don't know if I've loved everyone though. And I loved meeting. I love the dean too. I don't know. I think everyone I've talked to has been great. So I don't know if I can point out one professor.
It's all good. It's all good. It's all good. Just an opportunity. And and that's a bear hug to the whole faculty, because they, as a body, people love to educate in the same room. There's an energy that is as old as mankind, is people kind, so it's not just, I don't want to do the new thing. It's like, there's an energy in a classroom that's second to none. And we have this, IMPay architecture. We have this, it's like going to work at a museum or going to school at a beautiful museum. So it was a pivot, 2 weeks before spring break. Okay, pivot of 2020. And, Gonzalo, Dean Fratius, watching him and Dean Bernardo and Dean Unzueta. And there was a lot of dancing, a whole lot of dancing. So that's awesome.
Yeah. But you can hear it like when they speak at these town halls and they're like, they want to do everything they can to help us. It's not about, we want it our way. We want the professors in person. It's like, how do we meet both ends? Like, we know the professors want to teach in person, but we know the students need more flexibility now. And it's great that they can get everyone behind that and like encourage everyone to keep going.
Yeah. And yes. And boy, if ever there was an opportunity to practice leadership in real time, it's been these 2 years, because we have faculty who themselves have health realities. We have faculty with new children at home, so it's the whole human journey we've been through. Well, my last question. So, you launched with a Zoom education, and then we came back. What was it like had you been on campus since your high school visit way back when? What was it like to actually, were people taller than you thought they were going to be, or shorter? What was, walk me through your fall of 2021 coming on campus, or when was your first class on campus actually?
So I was remote in the fall, but I did come for a summer. I did come from a summer course. I was part of one of those summer courses. I was testing the new COVID guidelines like last summer. And I love the campus. Obviously I love LA. It just didn't realistically make sense to move there right now with my job in New York, but I was never opposed to coming to campus. It was just finding that balance, especially now having a job in New York. of I have to go to New York and I also have to work Eastern hours and trying to find the hours, and also my personal life in Chicago, and then trying to find the hours to get to LA. I don't mind going there anytime I've had to go there. So I did go all summer. And then I went this quarter twice, but obviously January was a little funky with Omicron. But no, I mean, I enjoy coming on campus for those weekend classes. And I love campus. I have no problems with campus. It is weird though, like sitting, now that you're so used to sitting on Zoom and kind of like I can make, especially with the time difference, I make dinner during class, which sounds like I'm not paying attention, but I sit there with my computer on loud and I'm listening. I'm just making dinner and eating. And it's like I get my own little, movie going on my screen and I'm learning. But in the classroom, it's hard to not have those distractions. It's hard to sit in a room now with that many people and like pay attention, because I'm like, oh, but I can't just like get up and go get a snack or and still listen. If I leave the classroom, I'm leaving the classroom. Like I can't go to the bathroom and listen. So I don't know. It's like, it's a weird difference of I have to dedicate this many hours in this classroom and not be able to go sit outside with my computer. And it has been a change, but I like the balance. I signed up again for next quarter, one in person, one on remote, because I like the weekday, like remote option and being able to do that. But I also like saying, I'm going to go to campus and I want to go and meet these people and I make a whole weekend out of it. I'm like, I'm going to go meet these students in person. I'm going to go, to this restaurant. I'm going to sit on campus in this classroom. And I think that having both honestly has been the best balance for me, especially for my job.
Oh, that's perfect. That's awesome, Haley. Well, I want to thank everybody who was listening in the background, and thanks for the questions. And we're here at the top of the hour. Really, when we were meeting, it was the Dean's Town Hall, I think, or one of the student government meetings. I forget when I heard your outcome. I'm like, oh my God. And so excited to get to, God, it's fast pass. I think I'm trying to think of a basketball metaphor, like you're the point guard who's faster than everyone else. You can't coach speed. It's really awesome. You're not waiting for the universe to give you permission. Yeah. And I think that kind of proactivity, it helps any human being in any endeavor in life, but you couple that type of proactivity with a resource-rich environment, which is what you did. You put yourself in an MBA program, right? And you went on LinkedIn that night and you filled out that, it's just like, wow. So for people who listen to this in the future, if I could just underline, it's like, be like Haley, be bold and audacious enough to declare that you're playing the game, play it publicly, play it out loud, out yourself. I want to be in sports. I don't know how to get there, and I want to be in sports. I want to work in California. I've never lived in California, but I'm going to live in California, right? I'm going to live in New York. It's just like, I appreciate your boldness and your consistency and constancy and follow through. And those are, nobody gets to tell us how our life, you know what I'm saying? Like every human being has the opportunity to aim as high as they're willing to work. Nobody gets to tell me my trajectory. Yeah. And I think Anderson is a nurturing place we're interested in your hopes and dreams. We don't want to dump on them. I don't want to tell you what the minimum age is. I want to hear, what have you been doing? Yeah. Because there are a lot of people who squeeze a lot of moments into a couple years. Definitely. Versus other people who have a lot of years with not many moments. And you are a person who squeezes a lot of moments into your years, Haley, and it's exciting. Your boyfriend. Are you you should teach Stephen Covey. I don't know, your time management.
He's in grad school too, don't worry. So
yeah, well, he's probably impressed. He's probably I gotta take a page out of her play. I learn from my wife all the time. My wife runs circles around me. Couldn't live my life without my wife. So it's awesome to have your main partner be a rock star, and you are obviously a rock star. So 32 seconds last, or more, this is your podcast, but any last thoughts, anything you'd like to say by, just something, you wanted to say you forgot, or, words of advice, anything you'd like to say to kind of bring us home?
I will say my two pieces that I will say, taking away from everything I said, was one, I didn't have to toot the UCLA's horn on any of this. I think that UCLA is something though I have so much pride and joy in. And I'm not just saying any of these things because I am doing this podcast. I will say UCLA has helped me immensely, and I'm very proud to go to school here. And I will say it is possible to do a FEMBA program from across the country and get what you want out of it. But I will also say on the other side, yes, to get the things that you want, and like what students always ask me, how do I get to the MBA? How do I get into sports? And I was asking myself the same question not that long ago. And I think what I tell them is what I did for myself, right? Reach out to people on LinkedIn like me that I'm willing to talk and meet with you and help you. And obviously I can't hand you a job, but I think it's the small incremental steps. I don't think everyone has to go get an MBA. I think you have to want it. And I think you have to want to put in the effort and the money. But I think that at the end of the day, if you want something, you have to find your own path for it. And I think putting in the effort to go meet people and find your own path and your own answers by doing these coffee chats or networking and like hearing from other alumni, maybe from your undergraduate program, like you can find those steps that maybe something clicks for you. Like the MBA program to me was how I needed to get there, but I wouldn't say that's everyone's answer. So I would say if you ask me if they need to, I don't know. But I think if you go through the effort of trying to craft your own path and learning from others, I think is just the best effort you can. And you never know where that can be called networking. I think it's research, but I think that can take you to where you need to get to, because that one person you networked with 3 years ago could be the person that offers you a job, but they could have also told you something that clicks in your brain of, I want to go work at Kraft Heinz because it will get me this next job. Like you could just find something that just clicks in your head that is just sounds right to you, and everyone's different.
Yeah. And just to underline something, you said it a lot. You said coffee chats, you said coffee chats, you said coffee chats. And what I hear when you say that, for anybody who's, is that like a special thing? It's like, no, it's a human being getting on the calendar with another human being to have a conversation.
Yeah. And casual, not asking for anything. And I think that's the most important thing. You don't go into something, and I've had those conversations with people that reach out to me and they immediately go, can I have an internship or a job? That's definitely the wrong way to go about it. I mean, it sounds stupid, but people do it. Like they're like, I saw this job posting, I want it. But I think at the end of the day, humans help humans, because I learned something. Like I could still offer you the job at the end of our coffee chat, but I learned about you and why you might be the right fit, not because you asked me for it. And so I think that's just getting to know people and learning gets you the job that you want. It's not asking for it.
I love it. I love it. You're wise beyond your years.
Oh, nice.
All right, everyone. This has been Haley Ehrlich, class of 2023. She's halfway through the program. She already got her job, dream job, through the power of networking and the power of being audacious and bold. Thank you for listening. Haley, thank you for your time. With the
Happy to be here.
Time zones. We got it figured out. And yeah, look up Haley on LinkedIn, reach out. As you heard, she's a person who believes in the power of like people helping people. And thank you for being a leader. Thank you for your contributions to FEMBA Council. We couldn't run this place without you all, and helping us figure out what to focus on in this crazy, crazy 2 years. It's we really, Judy Olian used to say, yes, I'm the dean, but students run the school. And she said that a lot. And I think Dean Bernardo is carried on that tradition wholeheartedly. And I know Dean Frasius has. So, thanks for your servant leadership, and thank you for your time today, Haley.
Yeah, thank you so much.